of the Lord.
Our first reading for this Sunday is taken from the prophet Isaiah. We would like to reflect on the theme, seeking the Lord, looking for the Lord. According to St. Augustine, we find in our hearts this deep longing for the Lord. It comes as a form of restlessness, but it is really a deep, deep search for God. If we only realize that deep in our hearts, our longing is for God. So let us try to make sense of that restlessness, of that drive within us to search for the divine. In the first reading, we find the people Israel having been subjected to a lot of turmoil, due mainly to their infidelity to God, due mainly to their sinfulness. Now they are brought to that point where they seek God. Where is God? Has God changed? Has God forgotten us? Very often, when things get rough, when we cannot anymore run our affairs, when we cannot produce by our own efforts the fruits that we desire for our lives, and we cannot find, or at least we do not want to admit, the real cause of our disastrous life, then that's the time when we look for God. God as our help. That was the experience of Israel. But it came in the form of a question. Has God changed His ways? Has God abandoned us? Has God forsaken us? Does He still remember us? These are variations of, where can we find God? Where is God? God responds not by identifying a place or an event where God could be found. Instead, God tells Israel, can a mother forget her child? Now, I guess all of us will have an answer to that. No. No mother could ever forget a child that came from her womb. Even if the mother, after being hurt by her son or daughter, would mouth out a curse or even a hurting word, deep in the heart of a mother, that child will always be there, will never be forgotten. So we can safely say it is impossible for a mother to forget her child. But God, through Isaiah, says, okay, but let us take it as a point of speculation. But should a mother forget her child, which is impossible, I, your God, your parent, like a mother, will never forget you. The God you are seeking will always be there. The God that you are looking for is there, even if you don't seem to see or feel God's presence. Where do we find God? God is found in His fidelity, in His constancy. And God encourages Israel, put your trust in me. Don't stop seeking me. Don't stop looking for me. Your search will not end in frustration. It will be fulfilled. You will find me. Why? Because I am here. I am dependable. I am reliable. If you can depend on your mother, I have a greater love. I have a greater love for you. So where do we find God? We find God in His dependability, in His trustworthiness.
Of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday is taken from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. We are reflecting on the theme, searching for the Lord, seeking the Lord. Now, in the first reading from Isaiah, the occasion for seeking the Lord was suffering. And the way that seeking was expressed was, has the Lord forgotten us? And God affirmed His constant love and presence. God can be found. He is there. He is dependable. But we see the context is that of suffering. Suffering impels a people to seek for God, the consoler, the parent, like a mother. In the second reading, we shift to the context of an apostle who has to preach the gospel as a missioner, and also who must administer, in a way, supervise the Christian community that is formed by their common response of faith to God in Jesus Christ. In this context, we find St. Paul expressing another way of seeking the Lord. And it is this: he is willing to count on the Lord to judge him. As an apostle, Paul has been subjected to so many trials, one of which was the division in the Corinthian community. And this division was due to preferences and loyalties of people. Some were for him, others were against him. Some were for Apollos, some were for Cephas. And those who were against him had some harsh words about him as an apostle, about his way of dealing with the community. And it is in this context of, again, trial, suffering, on account of his mission, that St. Paul now calmly seeks God, who will be a just judge. Wow! Seeking the Lord to judge me. Do you want the Lord to judge you? Normally, we would run away from a judge. We don't seek a judge. We don't want someone who might expose us to a truth that would compromise us. But St. Paul, with a pure heart, a clear conscience, he says, I do not even pass judgment on myself, even if other people are passing judgment on him, and other people are passing judgment on each other. He seeks the Lord. In what form? As a judge who sees my heart, who knows my heart, and therefore knows the truth about me. And I am willing to be judged by the Lord. And if I am innocent, then let the Lord render me praise and affirmation. Seeking the Lord not only for comfort, as we find it in the first reading, seeking the Lord to vindicate me in truth, seeking the Lord who knows me through and through. And so I have the confidence to face Him. I rely on Him to be my judge. Other judges might manipulate the truth about me, but I seek the Lord, who is not only all-knowing, but is all just, all true. So, before Him, I can stand and I will be given the justice and the vindication that I deserve. My dear brothers and sisters, I think St. Paul is leading us to an important search for God. Seek the justice of God, for God is the one who knows everything, and as a loving God, He will be fair. He will judge us in truth and in love.
Of the Lord.
Our gospel passage for this Sunday is taken from St. Matthew. We have been reflecting on the question of seeking God. Do we seek the Lord? Are we searching for Him? And what does it mean to really search for Him? A real search for God. In the first reading from Isaiah, a people, God's people, encountering trials and sufferings, begin to search for God. The God who is like a mother, a parent who will console. The context of suffering can be a fertile ground for our active search for God. Israel framed it in the form of a question. Has God forgotten us? God responds by saying, I am here. Even if your mother forgets you, I will never forget you. God could be found as a dependable parent, ever present, ever reliable. In the second reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, St. Paul seeks the Lord for vindication because the Lord knows everything about him. The Lord is not only omnipresent, but all-knowing. And so, in the midst of mutual recrimination, in the midst of condemnation, St. Paul seeks the just God who will give me a fair hearing, seeking the justice of God, seeking the God of truth. For only in God can I trust, can I rely for vindication and for fairness. In the Gospel, we hear Jesus saying, stop worrying over questions like, what are we to eat? Or what are we to drink? Or what are we to wear? Now that sounds strange. Does Jesus really forbid us from thinking of what we are to eat, to wear, and to drink? So is this an excuse for you parents? Not anymore to think of what to feed your children? And when they grow hungry, you will say, well, Jesus told me not to worry about what to eat or what to drink. Are we really to dismiss the need for fine clothing? Some of us will even say, wait a minute, these are the essentials, the basics for a decent human life. And we can even expand on this. You can add health care, you can add education, you can add shelter, you can add peace and tranquility in our neighborhood. Is it wrong to seek those things? It is wrong. Is it really wrong for us to ask the question, where can we find it? Now, let us not overreact. Let us not misjudge Jesus. It is very clear that Jesus is telling us not to ask those questions, He's not forbidding us from seeking food, shelter, drink, and the necessities of life. He's telling us to stop worrying, seeking for the Lord and the necessities of life can be conducted without worrying. Searching for God and for the necessities of life can be conducted without worrying, without being anxious. There is a difference between being concerned and being anxious. And the point of the Lord is this: try to enter your heart. When you become anxious, what do you really search for? What does an anxious person seek? And what will happen in your anxiety? What will happen to the basic drive of the human person to seek the Lord? Using this down-to-earth experiences of planning what to eat and drink, planning what to wear, Jesus is given an occasion to teach us regarding the real search of our hearts and how to conduct it without worrying. The first point that I would like to stress is this: you can seek for food, shelter, water, clothing, and the other needs of life by trusting in the Lord. It is not either or. I know we have a tendency to choose one and forget the other. Some people are so active in planning their lives that they take everything into their hands. They don't need God. So human activity is pursued without believing and trusting in a providential God. Others have a mistaken notion of providence. They say, let us just trust in the Lord. After all, Jesus said that searching for food, clothing, that's what the pagans do. Well, I am not a pagan. I am a believer in God, so I will not seek for those things. I will not worry. I will not work. St. Paul tells the Thessalonians, oh, those who do not work are not entitled to eat. So it is healthy to work for what you will eat. So it is not either or. It is not working or trusting. What Jesus is telling us is you couple your activity with trust in the Lord. That will free you. That will not make you a slave of what you are seeking for. For you know there is someone greater, someone who holds your life in His hand, like a mother, like a father, who will be there. And when you cannot provide for yourselves anymore, then you know there is someone who can do it for you. So human industry, activity, is sustained and made more realistic when you have trust in the Lord. Trust is not manifested in minimizing or cutting our human work, our planning, our search for what is good for us and our families. Which leads me to a second point. Jesus is also warning us, when you become anxious and you search for food, for shelter, for clothing, without recognizing God or trusting in God, the danger is these things that you are seeking might become your masters. They start ruling you. Without the element of trust, we become slaves of what we are seeking. And we cannot serve two masters. We abandon one and serve the other. The sad thing is, it is God that is forgotten. Israel asks God, have you forgotten us? God should be the one asking Israel, have you forgotten me? Because you have other masters now. If we trust in the Lord, we continue working, but we do not serve these new masters or idols. Pope Francis reminds the Christian community and the whole world, money should serve humanity and not rule humanity. Money should be used to serve the good of the human race. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Like St. Paul, seeking the justice of God. Those who seek the justice of God will not allow themselves to worship the false gods of money, power, and prestige. We should be very careful. Without trust in God, we might start serving false gods.